co-founder of Global Cyber Consultants and has built the U.S. business of the international cybersecurity firm Cyberfense. A noted thought leader on the topic of risk management of cyber-related assets like personal data. It is like the offensive line, protecting your cyber assets. Ironclad defense, tougher than Bill Belichick's permanent grimace throughout the game, no matter the situation. Go Patriots!
Okay, so welcome everyone to Uncover, the podcast about delivering the truths in business and in life. And I'm extremely excited to chat with my guest today, Steven Schwartz, who I'm calling an expert in cybersecurity, cyber insurance. I don't know enough about it, so I'll be asking Steve a lot of questions. But before we get started, I wanted to, provide a good bio on Steve, a little bit about his background. So Steve is the founder of a company called Global Cyber Consultants, and he's built the U.S. business of an international cybersecurity firm called Cyber. He's a thought leader, and actually that's how I connected with Steve. Like me, he speaks all over the place, so it's hard to track him down. He's really out there educating people, and as I talk about in this podcast, if you want to be a thought leader, you have to educate and add value. So he's a thought leader in a specific area on risk management of cyber-related assets, such as personal data, pairing off the last interview I did with James Felton Keith, which was all around personal data and how he talked about building value around the individual. And Steve, as well, is very involved with that. In fact, he is the co-founder of the Clean Data Institute, and he's a founding board member of the Internet Personal Data Trade Association. As you will see, he's fairly young, and he's recently been named New York City's 2017 33 under 33, important number, as we all know, in the world. But in his young career, he's already personally consulted, managed, and negotiated risk management and insurance programs for worldwide publicly traded entities in the excess of 50 million in annual premiums. So very impressive. I'm excited to hear from him. A couple other things that you need to know is that, he received an MBA in finance and economics from Union College. To me, that says a lot, and about, his commitment to really understanding, the economy and being hopefully one of the leaders in the future. That's what I'm looking for. Another thing that, is really in the, it's in the media every day today is, this whole blockchain technology, and I know he's going to talk about that because he serves as the InsurTech advisor to a blockchain consortium called Agentic Group. So that was a mouthful for me, Steve. Yes. Honestly, I would like if you could start by giving the audience a little bit about your background, how you got here today, and what you plan to do.
Absolutely, Jasmine. Thank you, and it's an honor to be on here. I can tell you, I never thought 10 years ago that this is where I would be or what I would be doing. I originally went to school for accounting and then, subsequently in the finance and economics space. I started my career, though, in big data healthcare analytics. So our firm did the analysis for the likes of Aetna, Blue Cross, and basically would, analyze all the data and the clinical data from all of their insureds and help them negotiate better rates with their hospital providers. And that was a fascinating experience for me. I'm immersed into the world of data, and I was one of the first 20 employees at year one, and we eventually sold with 175 employees after 5 years, and it was a tremendous experience. In terms of being part of something like that, and really getting to experience the tech culture and how really how a collaborative and innovative environment that was driven from the top, that I really commend my CEO for instilling that, can really drive such a great result and experience. And after that, I ended up working for what's probably the largest insurance consulting firm in the world. and not on the healthcare side, but doing the commercial property, liability, cyber insurance directors and officers for Fortune 1000 companies across 40 countries. And they range anywhere from publicly traded biotechs to many of the large retailers you see walking down New York City. So that was an absolutely fascinating experience into, the world of insurance in a manner that not many people know about. And we used to say we didn't get many Christmas cards from the brokerage community because we would make brokers compete for the business. But it would, we were the sole advocate for the client. And, it was just fascinating because the insurance industry itself is one inherent conflict of interest. The insurance broker wears three hats representing himself, the client, and the insurance company. And it's certainly not a knock on the brokers or any brokers, but more so just, a function of the industry, which is the second oldest to the first industry we won't get into. And, so that, I was there for 4 years, was a senior consultant, and, absolutely fascinating, and, still very close with my boss and my mentor there. And, around last May of 2016, I had this notion of really sort of recognizing the need to bridge the gap between cybersecurity and traditional risk management. Right, as we're continuing to sort of usher into this era of, data proliferation and, this digital era that we are, exponentially accelerating into, it seems, that there was so much confusion around what companies should be doing, from a cybersecurity standpoint. And, I found that not many people were really looking at it holistically as part of, your overall business strategy, and really taking something that can be complex, don't get me wrong, but really making it overly complex and not simplifying it like it can or should be in some cases. And that's sort of where we had started, and along that journey, which had many sleepless nights and a lot of questions from my family on what I was doing when I gave up a salary to eat very lightly for a few months. I connected with the likes of James Felton Keith, who you spoke with, brilliant mind, and immersed into the world of, personal data and the economic side of that. And, also, as another brilliant mind in Jack Moore. And, really over the past year, it's been an absolutely tremendous experience. The people I've connected with, and the knowledge sort of I've acquired from people much smarter than me has really been phenomenal. And it's hopefully we'll sort of continue along this path.
Well, it sounds, honestly, it's fascinating. And I'd like you to drill down a little bit for my audience to kind of understand what you're doing today. If you talked about impact on different levels, right? Who would be the first impact? Is it big business? Are you working more with media and analysts? Do they understand what it's all about? How does it affect the consumer? How does it affect doing business? So can you talk a little bit about the impact of what you're doing and who it's impacting and how you're making headway?
Absolutely. So it's, I would say on both sides, because we have on the commercial side, it's, like with our consulting firm, it's really addressing, the commercial interests and companies, keeping them secure and, trying to drive and really trying to create a new narrative around cybersecurity. And, we like to say sort of cybersecurity through to cyber strategy, and, for people to start looking at it differently. And not just as, another line item on their balance sheet, but something that we can, evaluate strategically. But, although that is, for these commercial entities of, various sizes and industries, at the end of the day, it's also protecting individuals, and their data, and certainly the work we do on, the Personal Data Trade Association side and what we're planning with the Clean Data Institute is really, to benefit and build trust, for consumers. And I like to say, trust is the new currency. And that we want, I want to know if as a consumer or, whether I'm at a corporate consumer or an individual, that I'm working with or transacting data, my data with a company that's, properly protecting it, securing it, and, I can feel comfortable about that. And like the whole Equifax situation, it's ironic because none of us are really their clients, right? It's banks and other entities who they are transacting our data with and making quite a bit of money off of. And there is an economic conversation there, but it's, they're profiting off of it and making that money, yet we're hurt at the end of the day. And it's interesting. One of the topics I talk about, and when I talk about cybersecurity, is this topic around value, right? So with all these breaches we hear about, and I try not to instill any more fear than the news does for us, and use the term become cyber competitive, show you're being proactive. But an interesting sort of topic is, when a company is breached, think of the value of what that breach is to that company, right? When you say someone like Target, it cost them $200 million and they had 90 million in insurance, but their stock price went down 46% that quarter from the same quarter a year prior, and several lawsuits to the board of directors, which is a scary position to be in. But that's one value, which is obviously hundreds of millions of dollars. The value to an individual whose data has been compromised is an intrinsic value, right? I don't know if we can put a number on that quite yet, but an interesting concept. And then when we look at the value of what that data actually sells for on like the dark web, as everyone's heard, is like pennies on the dollar. So it's interesting, just this whole space. And I really think what I and sort of my team and the people around me are trying to do is really, build and get companies such that they're stewards of trust. And we can all feel comfortable working together, and nobody's ever going to be so secure that nothing happens. It's just having the basic tools and knowing what to do when something happens to minimize the effects.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. I wrote about this a long time ago around, how to protect yourself online. As somebody that runs a social media agency, and I've been in digital forever, people kind of to me, it's very strange to see consumers just kind of let their guard down, and they're just happy. Maybe the majority is happy to just share personal information, and it's very dangerous. So I wonder what's going on in terms of the cybersecurity industry itself to educate consumers, for companies like Facebook, honestly, to put some stake in the game to, make it part of their job to protect the members of their communities. I don't know what's particularly going on around that, because all I know is a few months back, I trained a group of CISOs, Fortune 500 CISOs, on social selling and personal branding. And, and I got to sit down and talk to them, and the title CISO is fairly new. It used to be just a CIO. So it's becoming an issue. And I wonder what you guys are doing, or maybe what you know about what's going on, kind of, I think, on the reverse side for the companies that hold the data, the companies that sell third-party data, like you mentioned, Equifax, right? Mm-hmm. What are they doing, and do you foresee any standards happening there? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great point. It's the word, to your point, the title CIO now can be Chief Innovation Officer, Chief Information Officer. It's, we need sort of that CISO title now, or Chief Security Officer. So it's certainly an interesting time that at least shows some tangible, proof of what's going on. And, from a corporate standpoint, I think the biggest thing, is that people understand it's a cultural thing. The notion that it will always be easier to hack a human than it is technology will always remain true, right? So you can have the most secure system in the world with, everything up to date, all of the proper controls in place. But if you haven't brought the proper awareness to all of your employees and instilled sort of this culture around, security, and that it's, protecting our business, protecting our assets, you're gonna have all the controls, and they can open up an email and click the wrong link and expose your entire network. So that's one of the first things I always like to get across, and running through not just training to check the box to say that I've done it, but actual training to try and get that behavioral shift, if you will. Secondarily, we are seeing new standards come out, and certain industries have to comply with different regulations. But many of them are a bit reactive instead of proactive.
Right.
And, we've started to see New York has come out with for the any New York licensed financial entities with a relatively robust new framework and compliance that they need to, or regulation that they need to comply with. And it's interesting because there's a bit of ambiguity in some of it. In one regard, it sets a great framework for what companies should be doing, as a baseline and what they should be looking at. But on the other hand, it's where it's sort of a double-edged sword, is that it does require a lot of resources, both in terms of time and money, or, it can be a small insurance brokerage that has 10 employees that is subject to this and has to comply with it. So I think, more politicians and more people, at the regulatory level are obviously starting to push forth, sort of what we need, at least in different industries, to make sure companies are complying. But, again, we don't want to have security for compliance sake, right? But, security for security. And, especially to your point, Jasmine, on Facebook and Google and, the giants of the world, we've been lucky that they've never, really truly had a huge hack, like Yahoo, who now has a week, 3 billion emails it is. So pretty much anyone that's had a Yahoo account. And it's not so much that email address that, people may be concerned with or think about, but it's when they have those credentials and your password that they then go and try, a variety of different banks to get into. That is where it's interesting.
One thing that I wanted to address that I think is interesting, because you started out talking about how you were involved in healthcare, right? Mm-hmm. And most of the work that I do is with executives and companies in healthcare. And one thing as a consumer that I see, and an idea that I have, again, I'm not directly in your space, but something that might be interesting, we've kind of lightly touched on it, is, industries and companies' use of technology, right? Like if we start at that base, it's, like you said, it's really exploded. I've been in digital for so long, and every day it gets faster. So therefore, companies like large pharma companies, like large medical clinics, like, you name it. Okay, they're looking for better ways to run their businesses, to run their hospitals, correct? And so now they're just implementing all these technology solutions. And those technology solutions are to do things like communicate personal data with patients. But those tools and those softwares don't necessarily come with a guidebook on how to keep that data secure. So I almost think that there's something with the ways that industries are using technologies that they need to, like you were talking about, kind of have a guidebook. If you buy into some technology to run your business better and there's potential breach of data, that there needs to be some type of guidance or guidebook around these tools, around these technologies, or some type of rules set up in the beginning. And that might be another way to attack the potential problems, like you mentioned Yahoo or any of these tools. I don't know what you think about that, if you get down to those details with your client addressing technology issues and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely, Jasmine. And it's a great point, because one of the areas is, that we do in our work is outside of the cybersecurity and the compliance point is, a lot on the digital strategy and innovation. And one of the sort of the terms I like to use is, innovative companies, if you will, are those who can take technology of tomorrow, effectively integrate them with business models of today, such that it translates to the culture of yesterday. Now that comes just really from how to sort of, it's really change control and the human element of it. But there is, this notion of sort of security by design, right, from the startup, and it's making the users aware, which I think is exactly where you're getting at, especially in something, in the healthcare industry where, we're looking at a myriad of solutions to drive down the cost of healthcare. Part of it is, in my opinion, and I use the same analogy to cybersecurity, is that I think people view healthcare and health insurance separately, right, rather than together. And appropriate healthcare will drive down the cost of health insurance. Granted, we won't tumble down that rabbit hole necessarily. But even with cybersecurity, it's I say the same. It's with cybersecurity and cyber insurance, whether you're looking at that difference or the bridge there, but also just between the security controls and the technology that you guys are looking to incorporate, because I think in this time it's not so much the technology tools themselves, because it's commoditized almost, right? What's coming out every single day, from machine learning tools to blockchain technology you touched upon earlier. It's really, in my opinion, creating technology, for people and with people in mind, right? They really need to be at the center of it, and I think that's also going to speak to the successful companies, right? Because we want to understand, who are those companies that are doing that, are keeping our interests protected. And one of the topics, that you just touched upon, on, making consumers aware, having, that they know that this is a safe company, right, is one of the initiatives that we're working on with, Jack Moore's the chairman, and I'm the vice chairman of the Clean Data Institute, and it's still relatively in stealth mode, and we're putting all the pieces together. But basically, we're aiming to be sort of the non-governmental regulatory body that lets entities and individuals know, right, that this particular company that they're working with has gone through sort of the appropriate processes and mechanisms, that they know they're interacting with a company that's safe, that's trusted, and that they can be comfortable to work with. And I really think that's critical for our society, all of our protection, as we continue to be ingrained into the world of technology, and before it takes us all over.
Isn't that the truth? We'll all be robots soon, right? But no, it's very compelling what you're doing with the Clean Data Institute. And I think as you were talking, I was thinking about the fact, like, I'm a very visual person. So I was thinking about the fact that, like, every company in the future is going to need to have a security guard, so to speak, really. And it's, when you were talking, thinking about, I'm involved in the world of monitoring social brands and social media. And it's like, it's a very similar thing. You need to be monitoring what's going on with your user base. And I think that it's great what you're doing for companies. I think that consumers are still, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're still a little confused about how they protect themselves. I mean, you brought up Equifax, which is a great example, because, even myself, I had, my friends on Facebook, or, all the zillions of people I talked to on LinkedIn, kind of every single person I talked to about that had a different opinion on how they should protect their data, a different directive. Like, I had a colleague of mine, Scott, call me and say, you know what, you better sign up for this right now, Jasmine, you know what's going to happen. And I said, well, how do you know? You know, so we don't really, but I was joking, you know, we really don't know. So I think what you're doing for businesses is great, but I also think there's just such an opportunity to help educate the consumer in terms of, if you share your credit card here, is that a good idea? Or, you know, should you give your information to this company because you want rewards and incentives? So, you know, do you know how organizations are, whether it's a governmental agencies or more commercial operations or nonprofits that are addressing those issues? Or do you come across that? You know, I know you speak quite a bit at conferences, but can you tell us a little bit what's going on there?
Sure. So it's, you know, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. There's not enough consumer awareness, right, about, you know, about the protection, the privacy aspect. And even, you know, I was talking at a college a little while ago, and, you know, these are, granted, I look like I'm 17 and maybe just graduated school. But I was speaking to them, and it was, you know, and I told them, like, you guys, you know, you realize that every time that you download an application, there's that service agreement that none of us reads, right? And
right, swipe away.
And you just basically signed off whatever they put in that document, and which is usually tracking your location, you know, and a variety of other metrics, and exposing, you know, potentially exposing your data, certainly capturing it. And, you know, it was almost alarming as to how many people didn't quite understand that, especially this generation that grew up with technology. I mean, my niece, I'm supposed to know a lot about technology. My niece knows how to use an iPad 10 times better than I do. Right. It's funny and really cute to see. But it, you know, at the same time, it stems back to your point. We need more awareness. And what I've seen at the different conferences, so I recently spoke in Vegas at this InsurTech conference, and then just got back from Florida. Two very different, you know, sort of crowds that were at these conferences. And on one hand, the conversations around cyber and cybersecurity were really at the corporate level. You know, how do we calculate cyber risk? How do we quantify it? You know, as the insurance industry, and, you know, personally, I think they're looking at it in a very aggregate way, instead of getting a bit more intimate, you know, to those different companies and individuals that is going to, you know, get them aligned with the right sort of, you know, cyber maturity, as I like to say. And then at this other conference, which was to the very interesting industry in the life insurance settlement industry. They were a lot of the companies and individuals there were actually very antiquated in terms of, you know, sort of bringing, you know, the information that they have into a digital platform, and, you know, which just, you know, there's the business aspect of that, and why I say, you know, cybersecurity and cyber strategy is really, you know, a conversation around business. And when I talked to them, it was, again, just basic things that they didn't know, and I don't blame them to know. And it's, you know, sort of like when I got into the world of just insurance at first, you know, what enticed me, and this is sort of an anecdotal relationship, was that, you know, my former mentor was like, look, you can go, if you went and talked to a publicly traded CFO at 22 years old, they're going to about finance, they're going to run circles around you. But you go and talk to them about insurance, they don't know anything about it. They don't want to know anything about it. And it's about the last conversation anybody wants to have. And I think in many capacities, it's similar on the cybersecurity side. Everybody does know about it because, you know, we hear about a new hack every single week. I just think we need more entities and things that we're trying to do, like with the Clean Data Institute and the Personal Data Trade Association, to push out more awareness. And, you know, there are other organizations, you know, through through the government, and whatnot, that are pushing it out. But ultimately, and sort of what's interesting is, in Europe, they passed new regulation called the GDPR, which, has, there's 99 pieces to it. A lot of it's around security, but a lot of it's also around the individual and their rights, right? To, if I want to let you have my data, or I want the right to be forgotten, it's called, I want to take that data back.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it's interesting. There's a lot of interesting conversations around there. And it's, if you just look at the culture between Europe and the United States, after World War I, you would almost think we would be in the opposite positions, but they're very, much further ahead in that capacity, where our priority here is convenience, right? We want to get something done, and we want to get it done now. And
That's right.
I think in many capacities, we're all like that. And I probably preach more cybersecurity practices than I do myself. But it's, I think just looking and understanding the cultural dynamics is an important piece, and really getting everybody on the same page, because we have just in the United States all these different regulatory agencies, and it's all broken down by state law. There's nothing that's unified, no unified data protection law, data privacy law. And, that's what keeps it so confusing in many regards, and also very expensive. God forbid something happens. You have multiple states involved. So right. I think if we could get towards sort of a unified nation in that capacity, we can bring about the right awareness, and it doesn't have to all be fear-based, right? It's, I think, more changing the narrative to, like I said, I use the term cyber competitive on a corporate level, but on an individual level, it's just, take the right steps to protect yourself, and, really participate in the new economy, whether it's, it is shifting, whether we want to admit it or not.
Right. Well, those are excellent points. We just have a couple minutes left. So 2 quick questions for you. So one is, do you have anything coming up, any conferences you're involved in or events that you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So October 24th, speaking at the Westchester Mall, with on an event sponsored by Microsoft, talking about cybersecurity to some smaller businesses. On November 13th, we have an event being thrown with the Trade Association and a couple other larger entities, Research Now, which is a big market research firm, and a cyber forensics firm, RGL Forensics, talking about we came up with the name "Your Data Takes Flight," right? And which I love the name of that, because it's, in one capacity, we're going to talk about on the front end and the Equifax deal, on what's going on with that, and on the other side, it's your data takes flight in terms of individuals, right? We don't understand what companies are doing with our data once they get it, right? And a lot of them are making quite a bit of money, and which is, we all get to use Google for free, right? And so we have to expect them to make money somehow. And it's just about awareness. And so that's on November 13th. And then we're planning another event in mid-December with law firm Sullivan and Worcester around blockchain technology. And so there should be some interesting events and touching some interesting topics that across different industries.
All right, great. Yeah, well, I'm sure there's people that are listening that are more interested and perhaps attending involved. So is there a good way for anyone to get in contact with you, to connect with you?
Absolutely. So certainly my email address, or perhaps the easier one to remember, would be info@globalcyberconsultants.com.
Okay.
And to visit our website, globalcyberconsultants.com, and you can find me on Twitter at the name that was given to me that I didn't necessarily take, at the cyber Steve. But I'm learning to embrace it. So it's
It's your new brand.
exactly. So I am the cyber Steve, and of course on LinkedIn, and we really love to communicate, and with anybody that is looking for advice in any capacity. We're really, as hopefully I got across in our conversation. It's a lot of our interests are really fueled from our values of protecting individuals and creating opportunities for more people to participate in the new economy. And yes, security is one piece and one critical piece of that, but there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle, which will take a little while to put together. But we're always looking to speak with people and hear their thoughts about what they think they need, and or what they think industry needs and whatnot. It's sort of that collective mentality, I think, is what is exciting to me when we get in a room with a bunch of people and conversations like this where we get to dive down the rabbit hole a little bit.
Excellent. So I think there's a lot more that we can talk about. I actually see something maybe in the future. I tend to work with a lot of individuals on branding themselves and getting out there, and half of that is protecting themselves. And so, what you're talking about is it's absolutely on point. I think I agree with you. It is about getting. So, as we move forward into the new economy, I'll probably ask you to be a guest again on the show as it grows. I mean, it's so new. And also, I think there might be something with, some type of conference to be had around cybersecurity, the consumer, the whole new economy around the individual. So I think everybody should stay tuned for that. And I want to thank you so much, Steve, for being on the show and, giving some really great insight into this subject.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Jasmine. This has been such a pleasure, and I definitely would love for us to keep exploring ideas together. And I think I'm going to steal your quote on sort of the digital security guard. I love that, and it's the absolute truth.
Yeah, steal away. I don't mind.
So it's thank you so much, and this has really been a pleasure catching up with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Okay, take care. Bye.
Likewise.
If you enjoyed this podcast, and I know that you did, please hit subscribe on iTunes and on YouTube. You can also support us through Patreon and becoming a board member. As a board member, you will get early access to episodes, top 5 lists from our guests, as well as various action plans, such as action plans for personal branding online, LinkedIn marketing, and much, much more.